Hello everyone, welcome to this the session 4. Here we are going to be talking about the challenges which are faced by sports psychologists. The research studies have pointed out a number of ethical dilemmas and challenges which are actually faced by sports psychologists. In this particular section, we are going to be discussing and understanding about what are the challenges which are faced by sports psychologists. That is, we will try to understand in terms of confidentiality what are the challenges which are faced, in terms of boundaries which are practiced by sports psychologists, why are they actually practiced, and what are the challenges faced by sports psychologists while working with teams, and what are the challenges faced by sports psychologists while working with parents. So, let us look at the first challenge. Okay. So, the first is on the issue of confidentiality. Before I introduce the topic, I think I would really like to talk about this particular case study. A 20-year-old badminton player is feeling distracted and isn't able to focus in her practice. The player is scared to approach the sports psychologist as she feels everyone on her team will get to know her problems. She is scared to trust the sports psychologist. So, right now I think this is something most of you also have in mind in terms of whether can you trust the sports psychologist, can you actually share things which are actually bothering you when you go approach a professional psychologist. Okay. So, the question is this, can you actually trust the sports psychologist? I would definitely say yes, you can trust the person that you are actually confiding with, you can trust a professional who is a psychologist and works in the sports field, because what we need to understand is whenever you go out there and meet a psychologist, there is something known as an informed consent and confidentiality agreement form. It is a professional contract which is between the sports psychologist and the athlete, or the sports psychologist and the player, which says that without your consent, no information will actually be revealed to any person, be it your coach, be it your parents, be it your teammates, etc. So, what you state with the support psychologist is going to be remain between you two, and it is part of the ethical practice which the sports psychologist will follow. Of course, there are certain criteria and considerations where the confidentiality may be broken. Sometimes what happens is maybe if the athlete is harming himself, in those cases we have to take necessary measures, or if there is instances of abuse, or if it is directed by the court of law, or if the athlete has been doping, then of course necessary actions will have to be taken, and in those instances the confidentiality may be broken. But otherwise, in this informed consent and confidentiality form, you will see everything, which will be very transparent contract, where the session guidelines, what will you benefit from, especially going through the sessions, who will be the emergency contact person, what do you need to do, especially when you have certain difficult situations to do, every single thing will be pointed out. So, moving forward, however, in the sports field, the informed consent and confidentiality can have certain barriers. One, because I think we are working in an ecosystem where there are coaches, where there are parents who are also responsible for the performance of the athlete. So, in those instances, what generally sports psychologists do is if they need to discuss performance related aspects with the coach, they take the athlete's consent to discuss with the coach or the parent. And apart from that, another thing which can also be helpful and useful may be encouraging the athlete to discuss his issues or her issues with the coach or the parent on their own. And the third thing is, I think, educating everybody on the importance of confidentiality and respecting that the rights that the athlete has when it comes to keeping things confidential. Now, let us look at a second issue that sports psychologists face, and it is another challenging issue. Okay. So, we are looking at challenges and the ways to overcome as well. Here, the sports psychologists are actually working with the junior national team. She wants to conduct assessments of the athletes. However, she is finding it difficult to use some questionnaires. What are the challenges of undertaking psychological assessments with the team in an Indian context? So this is a challenge which I am sure a number of sports psychologists will talk about, and in fact I interviewed some of them and they all spoke about this. So of course questionnaires are mainly, in English, and a number of people may not understand English as a language, and probably for them understanding a regional language is easier, which is one of the drawbacks of the questionnaire. So I'm not saying that all questionnaires can't be used, but here I think using some things for an athlete who doesn't understand the language becomes a barrier. So in those cases, yes, in instances where they can understand the language usage, it's very easy. But otherwise, I feel that it's so important for us to use multiple assessments, like for example, using questionnaires, equipment-based tests, interviews, field observations, discussions with the coach, so that we get a clear-cut picture of what and how to support the athlete and still do our required assessments, And also doing interviews in the regional languages of the athletes can also be beneficial and crucial for helping us get as much as accurate information as possible. Yeah. In the next section, we are going to be discussing and interviewing two of the prominent sports psychologists. So, we will hear from them in terms of what challenges do they face and how do they overcome those challenges. Hello everyone, welcome to this wonderful discussion on challenges faced by sports psychologists. We have a very prominent sports psychologist in India, Dr. Chaitanya Sridhar, who has joined us for this discussion. Dr. Chaitanya was the first woman psychologist to be associated with an IPL franchisee. She's worked for RCB and she's also worked with the Indian men's hockey team. She's working as a consultant with JSW as a psychologist. So multiple, you have worked for multiple athletes from grassroots to the elite athletes. So your experience and expertise is going to be so valuable for us to discuss on the challenges faced by sports psychologists. Before we move to the challenges, I think I want to know about your journey. Tell us about your journey as a sports psychologist. Why did you choose this field?
Thank you firstly for having me. I think sports psychology has been very good to me. I have to start with that. So actually the field chose me, to be very honest. It wasn't me.
Okay.
It was one of my professors who actually told me to go and attend the interview at Sports Authority of India for the fellowship, and after that there's really been no turning back. I still recall there was 6 or 8, if I'm not wrong, including Dr. MP Ganesh, the then executive director, and I remember after that I'm like, this is where I belong. So then it went on. Then I went on to become went to get a PhD in Australia. It was a choice whether I wanted to come back or not, and I think that really defines, because I feel I wanted to come back and do something for the country. So I feel like that was really my choice. But why did I choose sports psych? No, sports psychology actually chose me.
Okay, that's very nice. So basically, I know that you've been in this field for such a long time. And
no, I'm not that old, but
no, I know that you have 2 decades of experience. So what has shifted when it comes to the mental health aspect? Like I know that even probably when I started, I was finding that it was challenging to convince people that you need to seek help, be open to seeking help. So for you, what has shifted?
That's a really good point actually to start with and to delve into, because yes, I've been in the field for around 20 years I think now, and I want to give this example which was in self, and there was this young basketball player, and she had missed her first conditioning camp. So she would hide. The assistant coach brought her, who was also a coach, but the head coach wasn't for. And this is how things were, right? So she would hide, and for those who don't know, if the coach sees, he'll be like, why are you going? You're not mad. And trust me, this was one girl who, I started the session and she was crying for probably at least half an hour. Right? And then of course she'd missed the first conditioning camp, but then she went on and actually got into the team, and now has an academy, etc. But things have shifted in terms of people embracing. Also, I find it very heartening that young athletes, and I do work a lot with cricket, they reach out and say, ma'am, I want support, I want a session. Coaches reach out, which is something which was niche, you know. And I think it's also the influence of a lot of you know, foreign teams. There's a lot of exposure to athletes. And I think, you know, one of the benefits of the internet as well in terms of understanding. So I would definitely say there's been a positive shift to an extent, but we're nowhere close to where it is,
Supposed
let's
to
say, yeah, especially in the Western countries.
Okay. I know that, you know, you have worked with multiple teams, you've worked with, you know, individual athletes, you've traveled with many of them. What do you think are the challenges which sports psychologists face, especially when they are, you know, traveling with them? Because, you know, we know that in the field of psychology, confidentiality has to be maintained. We need to set boundaries with people that we are working with. What are the biggest challenges for you? What have been?
So let me start with working with an academy first, and then looking at working, you know, especially when you travel with you know, be it an individual team or you know, a group. I think when we work for, let's say, a particular academy or an association, you know, you're going in through the federation. So, you know, the athlete is going to have their guard, right? And it's also, you have very less time to establish the process. So that's one. So how will you build that relationship? For me, you know, I always first get very clear with what's my philosophy. So I say, look, I'm here to help you with whatever it is that you want to achieve, right? And what you tell me stays between us. Okay, the only thing which will probably come out is just something which, you know, can help with performance. If not, nothing comes out. So, and like, for example, you know, then let's take IPL, right? Like, so you identify that, okay, this player is an introvert, okay? And with your sessions, you realize that he or she does not like to be disturbed in between, you know, when a athlete is in flow. I'll give you this example. So there was this one of these young cricketers who, you know, it was a state tournament, and he said, you know, I was in the zone, I was perfectly flowing. And then from the dressing room, you know, he kept getting a message like, you know, don't go off spin, don't play off spin, you know, it was something on those lines. And then he said 3 times, and then he said, I lost my focus, I got out.
Oh, okay.
Right, but that was very important, because then, and this was a very reflective player, very young but very reflective. And then he said, I told the captain that, you know, I don't want this. So now when you have a player like that in your team, and you understood, and this is shared, now you don't disclose the entire thing, but what you will say is, listen, this is an introverted guy who will function best when he's, you know, left alone. The only time you probably need, see when he's ready to receive a message, and don't overdo it. Now the same thing, you know, you could see that maybe it's another player who's absolutely stressed. And I remember a wicket keeper going on, मैं इसको बोल रहा था कि यहाँ पे मत डालो, don't put here, don't put here. And then you work with that player and say, listen, but what this guy actually needs is यहाँ पे डालो. So, you know, these are the messages.
The instructions have to be followed.
Be very
for
clear
them,
and followed. And I think this is where, right, when this is established, it can really work wonders for the team. Right? So your leadership group, so if you take IPL, for example, I had a very good working relationship with both Simon Cattage and the cricket of head ops, you know. So that becomes very important as to, are they open to you?
Yeah. Correct. And I know that I think you're making such an important point here, that we always think that psychologists have to function independently, but it is not true, because we have to work as a team.
Yes.
And from what you're saying, it definitely feels like, you know, as psychologists, we have to work with coaches and the communication with the players.
Yeah.
And everybody who is involved in the ecosystem has to be extremely supportive for us.
Exactly. Bang on. Yes.
Yeah.
Because if I have to give you another example of another league, which was not cricket, but, you know, the head coach was क्या मैडम आप मिले ही नहीं, you know, and it came through, you know, the franchise as such, and you know, it becomes a little difficult, because your head coach doesn't believe you're really fighting a very hard battle.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because we don't get, I remember, you know, my favorite psychologist had said, you know, you'll most probably people will meet you like this.
Yeah.
Thankfully that's changing. At least I don't get this, but you still know that it takes a lot of effort.
Yeah.
So I think one of the challenges for me definitely is to, and one of the things I take into consideration is, how open is this team? How open is the, especially leadership group, your captain, all this becomes extremely important.
Absolutely. And I remember when you're talking about the challenges also, one of the biggest challenges I have also personally faced has been with respect to communication, right? Like sometimes we would say a psychologist out of 100 do 70%, some days it's still fine.
Yeah.
But I have heard some of the coaches say that I want 400%. For me, the logic says that, you know what, out of 100, it can only be, you know, 100 is the maximum. But of course, coaches really, that is their job, right? Because they really have to push their athletes and excel them to do.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I think I remember I was with one of these golf academies, and I remember the head coach was like, "You will not talk about training." So I said, "Yeah, I'm very clear of that boundary." So but and what happens is athletes will come and ask you. So that's something. Though I was an athlete myself, like I don't give instructions on even, let's say, athletics, because I always say, "Listen, I don't know." That's really not my place to say. So I think that also becomes important, that to keep that clear demarcation of, we bring in, let's say in a goal setting, we will bring in examples ki ye karo, do this, but also knowing technique wise we don't enter, because I think that gets a little messy with the coaches.
Correct.
Especially.
Correct.
Yeah,
And
difficult.
definitely, like the way you're saying, we need to maintain boundaries and practice things with every single person. And I know that having been in this particular field for such a long time, people do come to us for quick fixes, right? They want like quickest solutions so that they can become champions, they can be like best performers, be it parents or coaches or athletes. Are they really quick fixes?
I actually don't know the answer.
Yeah.
But I think when I started my career, I had this rule that I will not see an athlete when there's an immediate tournament coming up. But unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know, like a lot of times they come to you in that state. And I think at that point, a lot of time what we do is basically, we're just giving them a little bit of tips on stress management.
Correct.
Sometimes all they need is that, or at least that's the first step. They go perform and then they come to you. And then it becomes a journey.
Right.
So, I definitely don't agree with quick fixes, but I think over time I've realized that, okay, take on your athlete, take on the athlete, because if not, that athlete's probably just not going to come.
Absolutely.
So, I think, and now, being part of various academies and, groups, you realize that sometimes it's always an SOS call.
Yeah.
So it's I don't think there are quick fixes, but I think there can be some holding which really eases your athlete, and I think that in itself helps. So I feel that I could be right or wrong.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the last question I want to ask you is, there are times that, as psychologists, how do you look at your athletes being capable? Because, Bert Hellinger actually in The High Art of Helping says that when a client comes to you, it's so important that we look at him as being an equal to the therapist. How do you practice that? Because it's so challenging for us, right? Because sometimes it's good for therapists to feel that, I am superior than you. But when clients come to us, how do you make them feel that you are capable?
Yeah, I think I'm also training to be a Jungian analyst, and there's we believe that an athlete, an individual and the analyst or therapist is co-journeying. So so any shift, right? Like there's this very beautiful quote by Jung which he says that therapy is like is like a chemical process. So if there's any change in even one, both are transformed.
Ah, wow, that's so profound.
Yeah, and I think for me, when an individual comes, you realize that at this point of time, this guy or this girl, this athlete is actually in a low state. And what we actually try to do is hold the mirror to their emergence, because and that's where we bring in what's your potential. And my aim is always that I don't want the athletes to get dependent on me.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So but when they're in a low state, they're going to come dependent, then interdependent, and then you get them to be independent. And I really like what you asked, because I think they are capable, right? If not, they wouldn't come to you. Because I want to end this with, we can with one of these panel discussions I was part of, but I was on the phone, and you know, the host just threw the question at me going, so you know, is it possible that you can make a Olympian or you can make a champion clean, you know, like without anything? And I was just going, oh my God, what is this question? So apparently there was another psychologist who said that, you know, if you believe, you can do anything. And thankfully, you know, I had another colleague over there, you know, Asian athlete, Asian medalist, and, you know, he interpreted the question for me. And then I said, no, like just because we're psychologists does not mean I can go win an Olympic medal now. It's not just about doing something in your head, but it's, you know, there's an amalgamation of ingredients needed, right? And then we also support, and like you said, it's that integrated approach which then brings out the best. So that's what I feel. And I think that's a really good question, is to, because I also feel that goes to coaches as well, right? Like sometimes you just know, a coach will tell you that, you know, this is how much, and then sometimes you'll see that athlete struggling, or even the parents, and you just, there's only so much you can do, because it's up to each individual, and is that their journey? That's always, you know, so I always go, it's up to them, and let's see what their journey really is. I don't know if I went roundabout with that question.
No,
but
I completely understand that you believe that it's definitely their journey. You know, it's up to them to do what they want, and we can only play a supportive role in the process. And,
exactly.
And every individual.
Supportive role, I think that's what it is. So that is the reason, you know, at least I for sure, and I'm guessing you, we don't go around saying, you know, my athlete won. I kind of, you know, so even when athletes have told me, or even, you know, coaches, I always say that it's, you did it ultimately. People can tell you, psychologists, whatever, but at the end of the day, it's that individual who goes and performs.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I think that is a really definite answer to capability, your point on capability.
So thank you so much for this wonderful discussion. I hope you have all understood about the challenges that psychologists actually face in the field. It can be with respect to confidentiality, it can be with respect to, you know, working with parents, coaches, and also our own self journey which comes in. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello everyone, welcome to this wonderful discussion with one of the prominent sports psychologists, Nivedita Rajan. She has got amazing experience. She's worked with elite athletes, you know, from the grassroots levels, and I think it's going to be so insightful and informative for us, because she has been a sports person herself, and she's been a sport parent. So I really am looking forward to this amazing discussion with you. Okay. So my very first question is, being a sports psychologist and having worked in the sport ecosystem with parents, coaches, what are the actual challenges you have faced as a sports psychologist working with the parents?
Okay, so thank you, Priyanka, for having me here and to share whatever I could, you know, share my insights. So parents are challenging. You know, I've also been a sports parent, so parents are challenging. So that I can say with great authority. And because you invest a lot of time into the sport, you take your kid to the sport, you follow nutrition patterns, you follow, like, you know, schedules, and, you know, you have to be up, you have to do so many things for your, as a parent. So it is a challenge for the parents. And in terms of working with parents, I've found like there are like 2 to 3 different categories of parents you work with. So you have a lot of parents, some category of parents who empower you, you know, they allow you to work freely with the athlete or the player, and, you know, they are, they leave it to you to decide what needs to be done. There are another group of parents who are knowledgeable, you know. See, today, in the yesteryears when we played, you know, then also parents were there, right? They provided all the support, but they let us be. So, you know, the knowledge aspect for a parent has increased because of the information that's available on the internet, and, you know, you have access to all that. So I find some parents are more knowledgeable, and that, you know, in some ways can interfere with you. Okay,
As a sports
as a sports psychologist,
yes,
because you are
yes.
working on based on theory what you have studied, and as a player myself I try to apply, but you know, you also have parents who read it on the internet and kind of feel that they could also do the part of a sports psychologist. And then you also have another category of parents who are a little apprehensive when you start with, you know, like they feel, you know, what's going to happen, and will they see, when you go to a professional you want to see improvement, right, in your child or in your ward, you want to see. And unfortunately in the area what we don't have a magical pill, right? So it needs time, but over the period when they see some quantum improvement, when they see their child positive responding, they are also give a lot of support.
Yes, I think from the points you've made, it is very evident that one is, you know, parents are apprehensive, of course, when they have to come to a psychologist
Right.
for taking help. And at the same time, you know, the challenges are with respect to, you know, if people are too knowledgeable and they may, you know, start giving you a lot of advice in
Yeah.
terms of how you
Right.
need to,
Right.
you know, help their child.
Yeah, I think it happens even in coaching, right? Like, I find many coaches, you know, complain about parents are like, you know, directing their kids what to do, and you know, it becomes hard to keep them at bay, right? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you, because my experience also has somewhere been the same. And sometimes, yes, I do feel that there's a lot of pressure sometimes from parents.
Right.
And probably for us to also make them understand that, you know, the child is somewhere struggling also because of these kind of pressures.
Yeah, like I can give you just one example. You know, a couple of years back, I was working with a player, and we were looking at how to manage anxiety and arousal. So I started the Jacobson progressive muscle relaxation for the player, and you know, she came for, I think she or he, I'm not very sure. They came for 1 or 2 sessions, and after that, you know, she didn't come. And I asked her, like, you know, what happened, and she said, you know what, we have the downloaded version and we are going to work on that. So I mean, it's fine, but you know, learn it the proper way, and then once you know it, you could practice, right? So that's
and
what
I
I
think
feel.
we definitely want the parents to be involved,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
in the process, but at the same time also understanding that, you know, working with a professional, so trust the process that the professional is also bringing in. It can
Of
be a
course.
sports psychologist, it can be
Of
a
course,
coach,
yeah,
which
yeah.
is so important,
Yeah,
right?
very important.
So one thing is, I know that you have been a sport parent to two of the international players.
Right.
So what strategies did you use as a sport parent, which I think can be extremely beneficial to a lot of people?
Yeah. Yeah. So my older daughter followed the same sport as my husband and me, that is basketball. So playing a team game is much easier in terms of, you know, you find a team and you're with the team for a, you know, longer period of time, and you like you have the support system with the players, right? Coming from a team, you have the camaraderie, you have all those things. So the kind of investment a parent does when your child is in a team sports is comparatively less than you do if your child is in an individual sport.
Right.
So and if like my younger daughter came from she played tennis, and she, you know, being an individual sport, there are a lot of challenges. So one of the things I would like you know, want to make a huge point is, you can't shop about your sport, right? Like I have a lot of you know, players, I've seen their parents, like they move from academy to academy. So what happens is, in a tournament they see one kid doing very well, and then immediately they, you know, go there, ask where you're playing, and you know, they make a shift. So this is like affecting the child. So my concern was that, right, my daughter, like she played right when she started from the age of 4, I think she started at 4 till she reached 18 or even 20 or 19, she played in one academy where, you know, she was groomed, and you know, we were very fortunate to have a very good mentor for her, and I'm very grateful to him also. So, and we didn't do the shopping part. So there are a lot of people who do shopping. So, you know, this academy is not good, let me move to this academy. See, you need to trust the people, you need to give them time to work with your child, right? There are like many times some players learn the skill very fast. Some kids take their time, right? Eventually they all evolve. So that has been one learning lesson. And then the other one is, don't live, eat and breathe the sport. That's what happens, right? You get so involved in it. And I remember the tennis coach telling me, you know, don't be a tennis mom. So, you have to learn to back off. You have to, learn to, and I think parents learn. I also evolved. See, even as a parent, initially I was like, my kid has to do that. They have to win. Why didn't my daughter score the basket? What is she doing? All these kind of things are there.
Yeah.
But I evolved with the process slowly.
Absolutely, right?
It's a learning process. So you can't teach that to the parent, right?
Yeah.
They learn it.
I mean, you made a very interesting point where you said that you wanted to see your children succeed.
Yeah.
But then how did you manage your expectations? Or maybe for the parents out there, what do you want to say in terms of how can parents set realistic expectations? I mean, probably as a sports psychologist,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. So bringing in that angle of having a sports background also, it was much easier because my husband and me, we used to discuss about it, right? Like we know to what level the sport can take you.
Right.
So the realistic part comes for if your child is doing very well, the parents are very happy. Of course, that's correct. But then you can't think that everybody cannot be a champion. There is one among so many 100 or 200 who will make it big. So that understanding we have to have. And the other aspect is, where is your child presently, right? I mean, if your child is not doing so well in the circuit, see, if you are at 14 years as a 14-year-old child or a 14-year-old player, you should be capable of playing in the 18-year age category, and at 16 you should be able to play in the open category, men or women. Is your child capable of doing that, right? I mean, from your couple of years that you expose your kid, is your child able to match up to that? Then you know what it is. See, the competition starts coming in only the higher age group, not at the 12, the 14. Because you can be a great player when you are young, because the other players are still evolving. They're catching up because players take time to learn the sport. So based upon where your kid, if they're able to play at the senior age category by the time they're 15 or even 16, that that your child is making some progress.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that is very important. And the thing is, you can't live your life through your child's success, or you can't see life through your child's success, right? So the reality is very important. Like I've seen a lot of children who have been in the sport, and by the time they are 14 or 15, they have completely don't want to go to the sports field at all.
Yeah, they get burned out also to a large
and they get very
extent.
distressed because there's so much pressure put by the parents, because the parents couldn't play the sport, right? Yeah, so all those things are there. So
yeah, I think some of of course, these are realistic and real life challenges which are actually facing.
Right.
One is definitely, when it comes to the sessions, what kind of trust that the parents need to have.
Right.
Once you trust the sports psychologist and you have more dialogues and communication, I think it will make the process easier for you to understand.
Right.
And at the same time, I think you're also talking in terms of, having the faith that, allow your child to just be. And allow them to move forward at their own pace.
Grow and evolve, right? It takes time.
Yeah.
Because, the sports process is a long journey, right? Like my daughter started at the age of 4. She was able to do well in championships and everything when she was 12 or 13. Many years. And suddenly if you start winning, that's also a excitement for you. You start investing more time. So whenever I talk to parents, I tell them what you're doing is great. Just encourage your child.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a beautiful
As a sports
lesson.
psychologist, I feel that we have to encourage the child.
And sometimes because children are coming to you for sessions, or basically the athletes are coming to you for sessions, and the parents may be very curious to know what is happening in the session, what is my child saying.
Right.
How do you decide in terms of what has to be revealed, what shouldn't be revealed? Because we've also spoken in terms of the confidentiality that the athlete has.
Yes.
I mean, so how do you decide that?
It's a tricky thing actually.
It's
a
quite
tricky
difficult.
thing because we have to remember one thing, that more than the coach, it's the parent who is got the most connect with the child, right? With the player. So, what happens is there are two things that can happen. If you're working with children below the age of 18 years, then some amount of information can be shared with the parent. Like, I talk to the parent, tell them this is what we worked on, this is what we are working on. Or sometimes parents have studied their children well. They explain to us what is the problem. Like, they have low confidence or they get afraid. Like, sometimes children open up to their parents. There are scenarios
Of
where
course,
they
of
open
course.
up.
I think I feel the same.
Yeah, they open up. And it's not always necessary that, the coach only has to bring a child, right? I know I've worked with a lot of parents and players where the coach is not involved actually, right? They have come on their own accord. And I have worked with players where the coach is also recommended. So you have two scenarios.
Absolutely. And in both the instances, I think like taking consent of the athlete and saying that, what, if is this okay? What do you want me to talk about it? And how do you want me to share this information? Will you be comfortable? Because this is something your parents are actually asking, in the session. And if the athlete is part of the session, that's also good, because most of the time the players might end up talking to their parents on their own and saying that, what, this is what is creating stress for me. This is what is creating pressure for me. So that can really help, easing the process for everybody.
And sometimes, like, I worked with a professional player also, based out of India, and his manager wanted to have a report about what was worked on. So you give the details, but not what you discuss, or not what the mental aspects. Like, you can give a report about what you worked on and what progress you have seen, because they come to you with, this is the issue that the player has got.
Right. Absolutely.
So many times the player themselves don't realize that they have these issues, right? It's somebody else who notices it.
Correct. And in some of the organizations, they also have a protocol, with some of the psychologists that, you may have to give reports, about the athletes on a regular basis. It varies from organization to organization. Based on that, I think our consent and confidentiality will change and will differ. So that is something that everybody also needs to understand.
The kind of subtle information that can be given without breaking the breaching the contract is good.
Absolutely. And what do you think are the challenges you faced while working with coaches?
Okay. So current generation coaches are very supportive, and they themselves recommend athletes to meet sports psychologists. They study the athletes, etc. So I think coaches are a great source of confidence building and reinforcement for the player. So I have not come across any situation where the coach has been a challenge. In fact, the coach have been very facilitative, very informative, and in fact after the debriefing of competitions, etc., they have come forward saying that mental training has been useful to them. So I think coaches play a big role, right? Remember one thing, Priyanka, that in the yesteryears the coach played an all-in-all role, right? There was no compartment. Like, so I think, when you become a coach, you develop all those skills, I think, unknowingly, right? It's there in you. It's there in you as
Absolutely.
a coach.
Like, I remember meeting a coach who said that, he would make sure that he would take all the athletes to the sports medical expert. He had to make sure that they go to all the sports science tests. So he was the one who was booking the train tickets and every single thing for this particular competition.
I remember our coach, he used to take us for breakfast after the practice once in 15 days. I mean, nobody knew those days that you should do group outing, but it was there. Informally, it was there, which we are giving formal names nowadays, right?
Absolutely. And the role which is played by the coach and parents and everybody, the organization in the sporting ecosystem is so required and so necessary. And I think for us to have less challenges, we all really have to work together.
Absolutely, all of us.
And with this, we will come to an end with respect to the discussion. Thank you so much, ma'am, for talking to us and also giving us so many insights and inputs.
Thank you, Priyanka. I hope it helped.
Yes.
Thank you.